The first time my daughter-in-law saw me reach for my newborn grandson, she pulled his bassinet away and told me my hands were too filthy to touch him. My son stood 3 feet away and said nothing. 7 years later, that same woman showed up on my porch with mascara running down her face and begged those filthy hands to put her family back together. She had brought my grandson with her because she thought an 8-year-old boy would make it harder for me to say no. She was wrong. What she did not know was that my son had already found the storage bins she had hidden in the basement. Every birthday card, every Christmas gift, every letter my wife had written to a child who had been told we did not care about him. She also did not know that our grandson had heard the argument, or that he had asked one question that finally destroyed every lie she had spent 7 years building. "Mom, why did you make me believe Grandpa forgot me?" By the time she arrived at my house, the truth was already sitting at my kitchen table drinking hot chocolate. My name is Walter Hayes. I am 68 years old. I live in a small town outside Dayton, Ohio, and I spent 36 years working in facilities maintenance for the local public school district. That meant repairing boilers before sunrise, crawling under leaking sinks during parent-teacher conferences, replacing broken windows after Friday night football games, and making sure thousands of children walked into buildings that were warm, safe, and ready for them every morning. It was not glamorous work. Nobody puts the maintenance supervisor in the school yearbook unless something has flooded. But it was honest work, and it paid for a modest brick house, 2 reliable cars, my son's college tuition, and a backyard workshop where I built furniture on weekends. My hands show every year of it. The knuckles are swollen. There is a white scar across my left palm from a sheet metal edge that caught me in 1998. 2 fingernails never grew back correctly after an accident involving a cafeteria freezer. No amount of soap completely removes the dark lines around my cuticles. My wife, Helen, used to joke that my hands looked like they had lived a more interesting life than the rest of me. She loved them anyway. Helen and I had been married for 41 years when our first grandchild was born. She worked as an elementary school librarian until retirement and possessed the kind of quiet warmth that made nervous children tell her secrets within 5 minutes. She remembered everyone's birthday, kept handwritten recipes in a yellow box beside the stove, and could turn an ordinary Tuesday dinner into something that felt like a holiday. Our only child, Daniel, had moved to Columbus after college and built a successful career managing medical equipment sales. He had always been ambitious. Even as a boy, he wanted the newest shoes, the cleanest bedroom, and the approval of people who looked important. Helen used to say that he was born looking toward the next room. I thought ambition would help him. I did not understand that it could also make him ashamed of the room he came from. Daniel met Brooke Caldwell at a charity fundraiser hosted by one of his clients. Brooke grew up in Dublin, Ohio, in a neighborhood with stone entry gates, private tennis courts, and houses so large that their garages were bigger than the home where Helen and I raised our son. Her father, Martin, owned several dental practices. Her mother, Cynthia, organized benefit luncheons, chaired committees, and spoke about neighborhoods as though they were brands of wine. Brooke was polished, attractive, socially intelligent, and skilled at making every conversation appear warm, while quietly determining whether the person speaking could be useful to her. The first time Daniel brought her to our house, she complimented Helen's kitchen 3 times. "It is so charming," she said, which sounded pleasant until I realized charming was the word she used for things she considered too small to envy. She looked at family photographs, asked about my pension, and spent less than a minute in my workshop before saying the smell of sawdust made her clothes feel dirty. Daniel laughed. I did too. It seemed easier. They married 2 years later at a vineyard outside Cincinnati. Helen and I paid for the rehearsal dinner. Martin and Cynthia paid for everything else and made sure everyone knew it. At the reception, Cynthia introduced us to her friends as Daniel's very down-to-earth parents. I spent half the evening wondering whether that was a compliment. Helen told me to let it go. She was good at choosing peace. I was good at pretending peace had been chosen by everyone. Their son, Oliver, was born 3 years into the marriage. Daniel called us from the hospital on a Monday morning in early November. Helen answered the phone, listened for 10 seconds, and covered her mouth with both hands. 7 pounds, 9 ounces, she whispered to me. Healthy. Dark hair? Daniel says he has your chin. I had been waiting years to become a grandfather, although I tried not to admit how much. That afternoon, I went into the workshop and stared at the pieces of cherry wood I had been saving. I had planned to build a small bookcase. Instead, I decided to make Oliver a toy chest. I wanted it strong enough to survive childhood, college, moving trucks, and whatever life came after. I rounded every corner by hand, lined the lid with cedar, installed slow-closing hinges so little fingers could not be trapped, and carved a maple leaf into the front because he had been born in November. Beneath the leaf, I burned his name into the wood. Oliver Hayes. Helen sat near the heater in the workshop while I finished it, knitting a blue blanket and reading names from children's books she wanted to buy him. We drove to Columbus the following Saturday. Helen wore a green dress she saved for church and weddings. I wore khaki pants and a light blue button-down shirt that she had ironed twice because I kept leaning against things. The toy chest was secured in the bed of my pickup beneath a moving blanket. On the passenger seat sat a casserole, a basket of muffins, the knitted blanket, and enough excitement to make two retired people feel 30 years younger. Daniel and Brooke lived in a newly built house in a development where every lawn was the same shade of green and every front porch appeared to have been decorated by the same person. 3 cars were already parked outside when we arrived. Martin's black SUV, Cynthia's white Mercedes, and a vehicle belonging to Brooke's photographer friend, who had apparently come to capture the first family weekend. Daniel opened the door. He looked exhausted, but when he saw us, his face softened. "Mom, Dad, you made it." Helen Hogum. I reached for him too, but he stepped back to help me with the casserole. It was a small thing. I noticed it anyway. The house smelled of lilies, expensive candles, and the sharp, clean scent of disinfectant. Brooke sat on a cream-colored sectional wearing a silk robe, her hair arranged as though she had spent the morning being photographed rather than recovering from childbirth. Cynthia sat beside her, holding Oliver. Martin stood near the fireplace pouring coffee. Photographs were being taken in front of a sign that said, "Welcome home, little king." "There they are," Brooke said. She did not stand. The Dayton grandparents, not Grandma and Grandpa, not Daniel's parents. The Dayton grandparents, as though our location was the most important thing about us. Helen moved toward the couch. Cynthia adjusted the blanket around Oliver, but did not offer him to her. "Oh, look at him," Helen whispered. I had never heard so much love packed into 4 words. Oliver's eyes were closed. One tiny fist rested beside his cheek. I remember thinking that no matter how old a man becomes, there are moments when the world can still make him feel completely new. I stepped closer and held out my arms. Brooke's expression changed instantly. She sat upright. "Walter?" "Wait." I stopped. "You just came from the workshop, didn't you?" "Yesterday," I said. "I showered this morning." She gave a small laugh as though I had missed the point. "It is not personal. Newborns have almost no immune system, and you work around chemicals, dust, old pipes, mold, all kinds of things. I retired 2 years ago. But you still do woodworking." She looked at my hands. Everyone else followed her eyes. I had scrubbed them with a stiff brush before leaving home. The skin was clean, dry, and cracked around the knuckles. "I washed my hands when we came in," I said. "I would just feel better if you did not touch him yet." Helen's smile disappeared. "What about me?" Brooke looked at her dress, her shoes, and then towards Cynthia. "I think we should keep handling limited to the people who have been helping since the hospital." Cynthia stood smoothly, as if that sentence had been rehearsed. She lifted Oliver from the couch and carried him toward the nursery. Helen turned to follow with her eyes. "Could I at least see him for a moment?" she asked. Cynthia did not stop. "He needs quiet." The hallway swallowed them both. Nobody spoke. The photographer lowered her camera. Martin became very interested in his coffee. I looked at Daniel. My son stared at the floor. That was the part I carried home, not Brooke's words. Not Cynthia walking away with our grandson. My son looking down at an expensive rug, while his parents were humiliated in his living room. "Daniel," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, Brooke is tired. We are all tired. Let us not make this into something." Helen's fingers closed around my arm. I could feel them trembling. "We drove 2.5 hours, she said. I knitted him a blanket. "You can leave it," Brooke replied. "We will wash it first." I watched something inside my wife go still. Helen had spent 6 weeks knitting that blanket. She had washed the yarn before using it because she knew newborn skin could be sensitive. She had stored it in a clean cotton bag, washed her hands every time she worked on it, and refused to let me eat crackers near her chair because she did not want crumbs touching it. Brooke had reduced all that care to something contaminated. I wanted to say something sharp. I wanted to remind her that my dirty hands had repaired the school where Daniel learned to read, replaced the furnace in the house that kept him warm, and worked overtime to pay for the suit he wore when he proposed to her. Instead, I looked at my son one more time. He still would not meet my eyes. I nodded. "We understand." Daniel finally looked up. Relief crossed his face. That relief wounded me almost as deeply as his silence. He had wanted us to make leaving easy for him. I carried the toy chest inside from the truck and placed it near the wall. "I made this for Oliver," I said. Brooke ran one finger over the carved maple leaf. "It is very rustic. It is solid cherry. We already ordered a storage bench that matches the nursery. Then use this somewhere else. We will see." Helen set down the blanket and the basket of muffins. She kissed Daniel's cheek. "Congratulations, sweetheart," he whispered. "Thanks, Mom." She walked out before he could see her cry. I followed her. We sat in the truck for several minutes without starting the engine. Through the front window, I could see the photographer arranging Brooke and her parents beside the fireplace. Cynthia held Oliver. Martin stood behind her. Daniel moved into the frame. Nobody came outside to stop us. Halfway home, Helen said, "She looked at my hands too." I kept my eyes on the highway. "I know." Cynthia carried him away from me. "I know." And Daniel led her. That was the sentence I could not answer. Helen turned toward the passenger window and cried silently for the rest of the drive. When we reached home, she carried the empty casserole dish into the kitchen, even though nobody had touched the food. I went to the workshop, sat beside the space where Oliver's toy chest had stood, and looked down at the hands Brooke had been afraid would contaminate her child. Then I covered my face with them and wept. I expected Daniel to call the next morning. When he did not, I expected him to call Monday, then Tuesday. I told myself he was exhausted. I told myself Brooke had experienced a difficult delivery. I told myself that families sometimes say cruel things during stressful moments. By Thanksgiving, I had stopped making excuses but had not stopped hoping. Helen set 4 places at the table that year. She stared at the extra settings for almost a minute before quietly returning 2 plates to the cabinet. Daniel sent a text at 11:30 that morning. "Happy Thanksgiving. Things are hectic here. We will talk soon." Soon became Christmas. We mailed Oliver a small wooden train, a board book, and the blue blanket Brooke had refused to use. The package was marked delivered. Daniel sent no response. On Christmas evening, Brooke posted a photograph online. Oliver wore matching pajamas with Martin and Cynthia. The caption read, "Our first Christmas surrounded by the grandparents who never miss a moment." Helen saw it while sitting beside our tree. She placed her phone face down and went into the bedroom. I stayed in the living room and stared at the photograph until the screen went dark. I wanted to call Daniel. I wanted to ask whether he understood what that caption said about us. Instead, I sent one message. "We love you. The door is open when you are ready." He replied with a thumbs-up symbol. That tiny blue hand became the last response we received for almost 7 years. We did not stop trying immediately. For Oliver's first birthday, Helen selected 3 picture books and wrote a note inside each one. "Grandma cannot wait to read this with you someday." I made a set of wooden blocks with the alphabet burned into the sides. For his second birthday, we sent a red wagon. For his third, a child-sized workbench with plastic tools, because Helen said Brooke would never allow real ones. Every Christmas, we sent books, clothing, carved animals, puzzles, and handwritten letters. Some packages were marked delivered. Others returned with no explanation. When we called, the phone went to voicemail. If Daniel answered, he sounded nervous and ended the conversation quickly. "This is not a good time. Brooke has company. We are heading out. I will call next week." He never did. Once, when Oliver was almost 4, I heard a child's voice in the background ask, "Who is Grandpa Walter?" The call ended immediately. I sat at the kitchen table holding the silent phone. Helen stood at the stove, frozen. Neither of us spoke. Brooke controlled their family photographs carefully. Halloween with Martin and Cynthia, Easter brunch with Martin and Cynthia. First day of preschool, apple picking, Christmas tree shopping, zoo trips, birthdays, and lake weekends. They were always present. We were never mentioned. To anyone viewing those photographs, Oliver had one set of grandparents and a father whose parents had apparently vanished. A mutual acquaintance finally told us that Brooke described us as estranged by choice. According to her, we had rejected their lifestyle, disapproved of their marriage, and stopped making an effort after Oliver was born. When I heard that, I called Daniel's office. His assistant transferred me before realizing who I was. Daniel answered cheerfully. "This is Daniel Hayes. It is your father." Silence. "Dad, I am working. Brooke is telling people we abandon you." "I do not know what she tells people." "Then you should ask." He lowered his voice. "Please do not start this again." "When did it stop? I cannot do this with you." "You mean you will not? You are making everything harder." I looked around our kitchen. Helen had stopped cooking and was listening. "We are not in your house, Daniel. We do not call. We do not show up. We send your son birthday gifts and receive silence. Tell me exactly what part of that is making your life hard." He breathed heavily into the phone. "Brooke believes you do not respect her boundaries. Her boundary was that my hands were too dirty to touch my grandson. You are still holding on to one bad afternoon. It has been 4 years. I have to go." "Of course you do." He ended the call. Helen turned back to the stove. "Do not call him at work again," she said. "Why?" "Because every time you reach for him, he teaches you not to." That sentence changed something in me. I did not stop loving my son. Parents rarely know how. But I stopped begging him to behave like one. We continued sending Oliver one card each birthday and Christmas. We no longer sent large packages because too many disappeared. Instead, every time we would have bought him a gift, Helen and I put the money into a college savings account we had opened in his name. $20 here, $50 there, extra money from a furniture repair job, a portion of my pension check. Helen's earnings from selling homemade bookmarks at the library fundraiser. We were not wealthy, but consistency can turn small amounts into something meaningful. "He may never know us," Helen said one evening, as she recorded another deposit in a notebook. "He will know we thought of him." Life continued because life is both merciful and cruel that way. My tomatoes grew. The roof needed replacing. Helen underwent knee surgery and complained more about missing her book club than about the pain. I began volunteering at a vocational program for teenagers who struggled in traditional classrooms. 2 afternoons each week, I taught woodworking in a converted storage room behind the high school. Some of the students had been suspended. Some were dealing with anxiety, unstable homes, or learning differences. Most had spent years hearing what they were doing wrong. In the workshop, I gave them measuring tapes, safety glasses, and something they could finish. A shelf, a birdhouse, a stool that did not wobble. Young people change when they discover their hands can create instead of destroy. One student named Marcus arrived, refusing to speak, and left 6 months later with a cedar bench he had built for his grandmother. Another, Tasha, designed a set of adaptive kitchen tools for her younger brother, who had limited mobility. I never believed I was saving anyone. I was simply showing up. Sometimes that is close enough. The school district featured the program in its community newsletter. A former student who now worked for a local television station produced a short segment about it. The camera followed me through the workshop while students sanded, measured, and argued about music. I spoke about dignity, patience, and the value of being trusted with real tools. At the end of the segment, the reporter asked why I continued volunteering after retirement. I answered honestly. Everybody needs somebody who keeps showing up after the exciting part is over. The segment was shared thousands of times. Former students commented with stories I had forgotten. Parents wrote about children who had found confidence in the program. A photograph of my scarred hands guiding Marcus's hands over a piece of walnut became the image attached to the article. The caption read, "The hands that built a place for everyone." Oliver's third-grade teacher showed the video to his class. I learned that later. She wanted students to write about an adult who had helped others. Oliver recognized my last name. Then he recognized the toy chest in the background of one photograph hanging on the workshop wall. The chest Brooke had claimed did not match the nursery had been moved into a basement storage room years earlier. Oliver had found it there and asked about it. Brooke told him it came from a furniture outlet. After school, he showed the video to Daniel. "Is that your dad?" he asked. Daniel watched the entire segment in the parking lot outside Oliver's school. He later told me that the closing sentence broke something open inside him. Everybody needs somebody who keeps showing up after the exciting part is over. He sat in his car while parents drove around him and remembered me teaching him to ride a bicycle, repairing science fair projects at midnight, working overtime during college application season, and standing in Brooke's living room with my hands held uselessly at my sides. He remembered Helen's blue blanket being set down like contaminated evidence. He remembered looking at the floor, Daniel called me from a number I did not recognize on a Wednesday evening in March. I nearly ignored it because Helen and I were eating dinner. I answered on the fifth ring. Hello? Dad. One word. 7 years disappeared and remained at the same time. I knew his voice immediately. Daniel. He started breathing unevenly. I saw the video. I looked at Helen across the table. She stopped chewing. Oliver's teacher showed it to his class. I see. He asked why he has never met you. What did you tell him? Daniel began crying. Quietly at first, then with the embarrassed, broken sound of a grown man who had spent years swallowing the same truth. I told him it was complicated. It is not complicated. I know. You allowed it. I know. You watched your mother leave your house crying. I know. Then you spent 7 years acting as though our pain was an inconvenience. I know, Dad. His voice cracked. I know all of it. Helen had tears streaming down her face now, but she remained silent. Daniel continued. I was a coward. I kept telling myself I was protecting my marriage. Every year it became harder to admit how wrong I had been, so I did nothing. Brooke said contacting you would confuse Oliver. She said you and Mom would undermine her. She said you hated her. I let her turn my guilt into an excuse. Did you believe her? Sometimes. Mostly I wanted to. I closed my eyes. Anger rose inside me, but beneath it sat something older and sadder. My son had not been stolen from me. He had repeatedly chosen the easier side of the wall. What do you want, Daniel? I asked. I want to bring Oliver to meet you. Helen covered her mouth. Does Brooke know? No. Then you are still hiding. I know. I am not asking you to approve of that. I am asking for one chance to do the next thing right. I looked at my wife. She nodded before I asked. Saturday, I said. Come for lunch. Daniel arrived shortly before 11. He drove an expensive gray SUV that looked uncomfortable in our gravel driveway. For several seconds, nobody got out. Then the passenger door opened. Oliver stepped onto the gravel, wearing a red jacket and carrying a backpack. He was 8 years old, tall for his age, with Daniel's dark hair and Helen's serious brown eyes. He looked at the house, the porch, the maple tree, and finally at me. Daniel came around the vehicle, but did not speak. Oliver held a printed copy of the photograph from the article, the one showing my hands in the workshop. Are you Walter Hayes? He asked. I am. My teacher said you help kids build things. Sometimes they help me. He considered that. Are you my grandpa? My throat closed. Yes, sir. He looked at my hands. For one terrible second, I was back in Brooke's living room. Then Oliver stepped forward and placed the photograph against my left palm. His hand was small and warm against the scar. They are not dirty, he said. They just look used. I laughed and cried at the same time. That is a fair description. He hugged me around the waist. I held him carefully at first, afraid that too much feeling might frighten him. Then his arms tightened, and I stopped being careful. Helen came through the front door, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Oliver turned. Are you Grandma Helen? She nodded, unable to speak. He opened his arms. She crossed the porch faster than I had seen her move since knee surgery, and held him against her. I brought the blanket, Oliver said into her shoulder. Helen leaned back. What blanket? He unzipped his backpack and pulled out the blue blanket she had knitted 8 years earlier. It was still folded, still clean, still almost unused. It was in a box in the basement, he explained. Dad said you made it. Helen pressed the blanket to her face. Daniel stood beside the SUV crying openly. I wanted to comfort him. I also wanted him to feel the full weight of what had been lost. Both feelings were true. We spent the morning in the workshop. Oliver asked about every tool. He touched the outlines on the pegboard, studied the clamps, and wanted to know why 3 different saws were necessary. I showed him how to measure and mark a piece of pine. Together, we built a small birdhouse. His first nail bent sideways. He looked embarrassed. Wood does not care how many times you try, I told him. It only remembers the nail that stayed. He pulled the bent one out and tried again. At lunch, Helen served chicken noodle soup, warm bread, and apple pie. Oliver sat between us and asked questions so quickly that Daniel could barely answer one before the next arrived. Did Dad sleep in this house? Which bedroom was his? Was he good at building things? Did he get in trouble? Why did we not come here before? The last question silenced the table. Daniel placed his spoon down. Because I made a bad decision, he said. Oliver looked at him. For 7 years? Daniel flinched. Yes. That is a lot of decisions. It is. Did Grandpa do something wrong? No. Oliver turned toward me. Did Grandma? No. Daniel answered before I could. They did nothing wrong. Helen looked down at her soup. Oliver accepted the answer but did not appear satisfied. Children know when a truth has more rooms than the adults are showing them. Before leaving, he asked whether he could return the next Saturday. Daniel looked at me. You are welcome here, I said. Both of you. But I will not be a secret forever. Daniel nodded. I understand. For 3 months, they visited twice a month. Daniel told Brooke he was taking Oliver to parks, museums, and baseball practices. I disliked the lies, but I loved the boy. Every time I considered refusing, I saw Helen waiting by the window on Saturday mornings, already planning lunch. Oliver learned to use a hand drill. He planted tomatoes with Helen. He read on the porch. He discovered the toy chest I had built in an old photograph and asked where it was. Daniel said he thought Brooke had placed it in storage. Oliver began calling us after school from Daniel's work phone. He told us about spelling tests, soccer practice, and a classmate named Mason who cheated at kickball. For the first time in 7 years, our house contained the sound of a child's laughter. Helen began buying cereal nobody over 60 should eat. I stopped pretending the plastic dinosaur on my workbench was in the way. The secret ended when Oliver carried his birdhouse into their kitchen and Brooke saw my initials burned into the bottom. W.H. She recognized them immediately. Where did you get that? She asked. Oliver smiled. Grandpa Walter helped me make it. Daniel was standing near the refrigerator. Brooke looked at him. Grandpa Walter? Oliver continued without noticing the danger. He has a workshop. Grandma Helen made pie. Dad used to sleep in the room with the baseball wallpaper, but they painted it. Brooke waited until Oliver went upstairs. Then she closed the kitchen door. Daniel told me later that her voice was terrifying because it remained perfectly calm. How long? She asked. 3 months. You took my son to those people for 3 months and lied to me? Those people are my parents. They are strangers to Oliver. Because we made them strangers. Do not include me in your guilt. You told them they never sent anything. They stopped trying. No, we stopped answering. Your father hates me. My father barely speaks about you. That is worse. How? Because silence is judgment. Daniel stared at her. For the first time, he heard how impossible the rules had always been. If we spoke, we were attacking her. If we stayed quiet, our silence was an attack. If we sent gifts, we were crossing boundaries. If we stopped, it proved we did not care. Brooke could not be wrong, because every possible response had been designed to confirm her story. She demanded that the visits stop. Daniel refused. She threatened to tell Oliver that we had rejected him. Daniel told her he would correct any lie she told. She cried. She accused him of betraying their marriage. She called Cynthia, who came over within the hour and reminded Daniel that Brooke had protected Oliver from unstable influences. My father repaired schools for 36 years, Daniel said. My mother worked with children every day. What exactly is unstable about them? Cynthia answered. They do not fit the life you have built. That sentence stayed with him. They do not fit the life you have built. Not dangerous, not cruel, not unloving. We simply did not match the image. Daniel slept in the guest room that night. The following weekend, Brooke proposed a compromise. Both sets of grandparents would attend Thanksgiving at their house. She called it a reset. Daniel believed it was progress. Helen did too. I was less certain. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Brooke sent us a group message containing rules. We were to arrive no earlier than 2 because Cynthia needed the kitchen. We should wear neutral, autumn colors for photographs. We were not to bring homemade food because several guests had dietary preferences. We were not to give Oliver gifts without Brooke's approval. We were not to discuss the years of separation. We were not to mention the hidden visits. We were not to use the words abandoned, excluded, or lied. The final line read, "This day is about healing, not blame. I expect everyone to behave with maturity." I read the message twice. Helen said, "At least we will be together." I looked at her. She is inviting us into a photograph, not back into the family. Maybe a photograph is where it starts. Helen had waited 7 years. I could not take hope from her, even when I did not trust it. We went. I wore a brown sweater. Helen wore cream. We brought no food, no gifts, and no expectations we were willing to admit. Brooke opened the door with her phone already recording. "They are here," she said brightly to the camera. Our family is finally complete. She hugged Helen without touching her body and kissed the air near my cheek. Before we had removed our coats, she positioned us beneath a decorative sign that read, "Grateful, thankful, blessed." Cynthia directed everyone where to stand. Martin held Oliver. Daniel stood behind Brooke. Helen and I were placed at the edge. After 3 photographs, Brooke looked at my hands. "Walter, could you put them behind your back?" The scars catch the light strangely. Nobody spoke. I slowly placed both hands in front of me instead. "They can stay where they are," Brooke laughed for the camera. "He is stubborn." "He is my grandpa," Oliver said. "His hands built my birdhouse." Brooke's smile tightened. The dining room table seated 10. 12 people had been invited. A folding card table stood near the kitchen with 2 place settings. Our names were written on the cards. Cynthia and Martin sat beside Oliver. Helen and I were assigned the folding table beside the swinging kitchen door. Every time someone entered, the door struck the back of my chair. "There was a seating issue," Brooke explained. Daniel stared at the place cards. "Move mine and Oliver's seats," he said. "We will sit with Mom and Dad." Brooke's face changed. "Do not create drama. I am fixing the seating issue. Your clients are here." 2 couples from Daniel's company were indeed watching. That was why Brooke had invited us. The Thanksgiving reunion was not for Oliver. It was a public relations event inside her own dining room. Daniel moved the chairs anyway. Oliver carried his plate to the folding table. Helen smiled at him, but I could see the hurt beneath it. Dinner began with Cynthia offering a prayer about forgiveness. Then Brooke proposed a toast. She stood holding a glass of wine while a phone on the sideboard recorded. "This year has taught us that family requires grace," she said. "People can misunderstand boundaries and hold on to resentment, but mature adults choose to move forward. Walter and Helen, we are so glad you finally decided to be part of Oliver's life." Helen went still. My fork touched the plate. Brooke continued smiling. I thought perhaps Walter could say a few words about fresh starts. Every face turned toward me. She wanted an apology. Not privately, not honestly. She wanted a recorded confession that could be posted online beside the photographs. If I accepted her version, she would become the gracious daughter-in-law who welcomed us back after we had stayed away. I looked at Daniel. 7 years earlier, he had stared at the floor. Now he looked directly at me, but he still said nothing. I stood. "I do have something to say." Brooke's smile widened. "Wonderful." Helen and I did not decide to leave Oliver's life. We were told not to touch him the day we met him. After that, our calls were ignored, our packages disappeared, and our names were removed from his story. We came today because our grandson deserves to know that love was waiting for him, even when access was not. The room became silent. Brooke placed her glass down. "We agreed not to assign blame. You assigned it during your toast." I was trying to be gracious. "Grace does not require a lie." Her cheeks flushed. "This is exactly why I kept my distance. You refused to respect me in my own home. Respect is not pretending you did nothing. You have always looked down on me." I almost laughed. "You refused to let me hold a baby because you thought my hands were dirty." They were dirty. The words came quickly, instinctively, before she could polish them. Everyone heard. Oliver looked at my hands. Helen lowered her eyes. Brooke realized what she had said but did not apologize. Instead, she doubled down. "You had spent your life working in old buildings and workshops. I was protecting my child. For 7 years, I was protecting the family culture we wanted for him." "What culture is that?" She gestured around the dining room, toward the crystal glasses, catered food, matching napkins, and people watching her lose control. "Standards, Walter. Education, cleanliness, ambition." I did not want Oliver growing up believing that grease under his nails and settling for an ordinary life were things to admire. My chair scraped against the floor as I stepped away from the table. Helen touched my arm. This time, she was not steadying herself. She was telling me she was ready to go. Daniel stood. "Those hands paid for my education," he said. Brooke stared at him. He continued. "Those hands fixed my bicycle, built my bedroom, worked overtime when I needed braces, and held me every time I was afraid. Dad did not settle for an ordinary life. He built one. You just never respected it because nobody photographed him doing it." Cynthia said, "Daniel, think carefully." "I have been thinking carefully for 7 years. Brooke's eyes filled with tears. "You are humiliating me in front of everyone. You invited my parents here to humiliate them. I invited them to heal. You seated them beside the kitchen door. There was no space. There was space beside their grandson. Oliver stood and moved between Helen and me. He took one of my scarred hands and one of hers. Can I go with Grandpa and Grandma? Brooke's face collapsed. No. We are having Thanksgiving. It does not feel like Thanksgiving. He was 8 years old, but he said it with the exhausted honesty of someone much older. Daniel picked up his keys. We are leaving. If you walk out that door, do not expect to come back tonight. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. That threat only works if this still feels like home. He left with us. We ate Thanksgiving dinner at a 24-hour diner because Helen had followed Brooke's rule and cooked nothing. Oliver ordered pancakes shaped like a turkey. Daniel drank coffee and stared through the window. I did not celebrate his choice. I knew what it had cost him to make it. I also knew how many years it had taken. Near midnight, Daniel and Oliver came home with us. Helen placed clean sheets on the guest bed. Oliver slept beneath the blue blanket she had knitted when he was born. Daniel sat at our kitchen table until almost 3 in the morning. I am sorry, he said repeatedly. I am sorry I let her treat you that way. I am sorry I made Mom beg for scraps of her own grandson. I am sorry I kept choosing the easiest silence. Stop apologizing long enough to decide what happens next, I told him. I do not know what happens next. Then do not make promises, just stop lying. Daniel nodded. The next morning, he returned to Columbus alone. He needed clothing, work equipment, and time to speak to Brooke without Oliver present. While looking for old luggage in the basement, he noticed that several storage bins had been moved from their usual place. One was labeled tax records, although it was too light to contain paper. He opened it. Inside were 7 years of our lives. Birthday cards addressed to Oliver. Christmas cards, return packages, books still wrapped in brown paper, the carved alphabet blocks, the wooden train, photographs Helen had included so Oliver would recognize us, letters written in her careful handwriting. Dear Oliver, you are 3 today. Grandpa says 3 is the perfect age to learn how to plant tomatoes. Dear Oliver, you are 5. I wonder whether you have started reading. I saved all of Daniel's favorite books for you. Dear Oliver, you are 7. We think about you every day, even if you do not know our names yet. Beneath the cards was a folder containing printed screenshots of messages from Daniel. In them, he asked Brooke whether packages had arrived. Her replies said no. One message read, Your parents have clearly moved on. We should too. Daniel sat on the basement floor, surrounded by unopened proof that we had never moved on. Brooke found him there. She stopped on the stairs. I can explain. 7 years, Daniel said. You hid 7 years of mail. They would have confused Oliver. You told me nothing came. Because every package was an attempt to bypass me. They were birthday cards. They refused to apologize. For wanting to hold their grandson? For judging me. They barely spoke to you after that day. Their silence was judgment. Daniel held up one of Helen's letters. My mother told Oliver she hoped he liked first grade. How is that judgment? Brooke crossed her arms. You are emotional. I am finally paying attention. Your father has spent months turning you against me. Dad asked me to stop lying. That is all he said. He wants our marriage destroyed. No, he wanted his family. You made that feel like an attack. Oliver had returned to Columbus with Martin that afternoon because Brooke claimed she needed to see him. He entered the basement while they were arguing. Neither adult noticed immediately. He saw the packages spread across the floor. He recognized my handwriting from the photograph I had signed for him. What are those? Daniel turned. Brooke stepped in front of the bin. Old things. Oliver picked up a birthday card with a large number 4 on the front. His name was written across the envelope. This is mine. Oliver, go upstairs. He opened it. Inside was a photograph of Helen and me beside the maple tree, holding a sign that read, Happy 4th birthday, Oliver. He read the note slowly. Then he opened another card and another. You said they never sent me anything, he whispered. Brooke reached for the cards. Oliver pulled them against his chest. I was trying to protect you. From books, from people who did not respect our family. They are our family. You do not understand. Did Dad know? No, Daniel said. I should have known, but I did not. Oliver looked at his mother, his eyes filled with tears. Why did you make me believe Grandpa forgot me? Brooke had no prepared answer. I did what I thought was best. For who? It was the question that followed her for the rest of the week. Daniel packed several bags and moved with Oliver into an extended stay apartment near his office. He did not file anything or make grand announcements. He simply said he needed space where the truth would not be treated like disrespect. Brooke called him constantly. She sent long messages about family unity, reputation, stability, and the damage separation could do to Oliver. She posted a photograph from Thanksgiving, taken before dinner, and wrote, "Protecting your home sometimes means standing firm when outsiders refuse healthy boundaries." She cropped Helen and me out. The comments praised her strength. One woman wrote, "Never let toxic grandparents undermine your parenting." Brooke liked the comment. Then she came to our house. It was a cold Thursday afternoon. Snow had started falling in small, dry flakes. I was in the workshop helping Oliver sand the edges of a bookshelf when Helen appeared in the doorway. "Walter," she said quietly, "Brooke is here." I looked through the window. Brooke stood on the porch wearing a camel-colored coat and holding a leather handbag against her chest. Her makeup was carefully applied, but her eyes were swollen. Daniel had warned us she might come. He had also warned us that she might bring Oliver to make the conversation harder, but Oliver was already with us. Brooke had driven 90 minutes alone, believing Daniel had taken him to school. She entered the living room and glanced around as though seeing the house for the first time. The floors were clean. Books lined the walls. Photographs covered the mantel. A quilt Helen's mother had made rested across the couch. Nothing matched the version of us Brooke had carried in her head for 7 years. "Where is Oliver?" she asked. "In the workshop," I said. Her expression tightened. "You let him use tools?" "Under supervision." "He is 8. That is old enough to learn responsibility." "This is exactly what I mean." "Why are you here, Brooke?" She sat on the edge of the couch. "Daniel is destroying our family. Daniel is staying in an apartment. Because of you. Because of choices made in your house. You have wanted this from the beginning." I wanted to hold my grandson. Her eyes filled. "Please talk to Daniel. Tell him marriages go through difficult seasons. Tell him Oliver needs both parents under one roof. Then perhaps you should begin by telling Daniel the truth without explaining why every lie was necessary." I was protecting my son. "You were protecting your position. You do not know what it is like to have people judging every parenting decision. You judged my hands before I touched him. Why can you not let go of that?" "Because it was the first honest thing you ever said to me. Everything after that was simply a longer version." She stood. "I came here willing to humble myself. You came here to recruit me. I am asking you to help your son. My son does not need help returning to the arrangement that made him miserable. He needs courage to decide what kind of man he wants to be." Her mouth hardened. "So you will not intervene?" "No. After everything I allowed recently? The visits? Thanksgiving? You did not allow a relationship. You tried to control one. I gave you access to my child. Oliver is not property." She looked toward the hallway. "I want to speak to him." "You may speak to him when Daniel says it is appropriate. I am his mother, and I am the grandfather you removed for 7 years. Titles do not excuse behavior." At that moment, Oliver entered from the back hallway. He had heard voices and removed his safety glasses. Sawdust covered the front of his sweatshirt. He looked at Brooke, then at me. "Mom?" Brooke immediately softened her face. "Baby, come here." He remained near the doorway. "I came to take you home. Dad said I am staying with Grandpa and Grandma tonight. Your father is confused right now. He does not seem confused. Adults have problems children do not understand. I understand the cards." Her face changed. "Oliver. Grandma wrote every year. We will talk about that privately." "You always say privately when you do not want someone else to answer." Brooke glanced at me. "Do you hear how he speaks to me now?" He asked a question. "You are teaching him disrespect." Oliver's eyes filled, but his voice stayed steady. "Grandpa did not teach me that you hid the cards." Brooke stepped toward him. "I made choices to protect our household. One day, you will understand." He backed away. "I do not want to go." She stared at him as though the sentence had physically struck her. "I am your mother." "I know. Then you come with me." "Dad said I could stay." "Your father does not make every decision. Neither do you." Brooke turned toward me. "This is what you wanted. You wanted him to choose you." I shook my head. No child should have to choose which adult is allowed to tell the truth. I led her to the workshop. Along one wall, Daniel had stacked the bins he brought from the basement. We had sorted the contents by year. Every gift, every letter, every unopened card. The toy chest Brooke rejected sat beneath the window, its cherry wood darkened beautifully with age. Oliver had placed the blue blanket inside it. On the workbench lay Helen's notebook recording each birthday and Christmas deposit into his college account. Brooke looked at the shelves. Her face lost color. Why are these displayed like evidence? They are not displayed, I said. We are deciding what Oliver wants to keep. I opened the notebook and placed it before her. Every year we could not give him a present. We saved something for his future. She looked at the balance. Helen and I had contributed for 7 years. The account would not pay for an elite private university, but it could cover most of 4 years at an Ohio public college. Brooke's hand tightened around the edge of the workbench. You did this without telling us? We tried to tell you many things. Are you using money to turn him against me? You hid wooden blocks and birthday cards. Do not pretend this is about money. Oliver walked to the shelf and picked up the carved train I had made when he was 2. He rolled it across the workbench. One wheel squeaked. Can we fix this? He asked. Of course. Brooke stared at him. Oliver, please come home. He did not look at her. I am home tonight. Helen entered carrying a tray of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. She paused when she saw Brooke. There is enough if you are hungry, she said. That was Helen. Even after 7 years, even after Thanksgiving, she offered food. Brooke's eyes briefly filled with something that might have been shame. Then pride covered it. I cannot eat. All right, Helen set the tray down. Oliver took her hand. Grandma, did you really write every birthday? Everyone. Even when I did not answer? Helen knelt beside him. You could not answer letters you never received. Did you think I did not like you? Her face crumpled. No, sweetheart. I hoped you did not know enough to dislike us. He hugged her. Brooke watched them, and for the first time I think she understood what she had actually stolen. Not gifts, not photographs. Time. A grandmother kneeling on a workshop floor, holding a boy who should have known the shape of her embrace years earlier. Brooke whispered, I was afraid. I looked at her. It was the first sentence she had spoken that did not sound rehearsed. Of what? That Daniel would compare me to Helen. That Oliver would prefer being here. That your family would see through me. My parents always said you people resented us. They said if I gave you room, you would take over. Helen stood slowly. We did not want to take over. We wanted a place. I know that now. Knowing now does not return 7 years. Brooke wiped beneath her eyes. What am I supposed to do? I could have punished her then. I could have listed every birthday, every holiday, every night, Helen cried. I could have told her she deserved to lose everything. But boundaries are not revenge, and dignity is not cruelty. Tell the truth, I said, without adding a reason that makes the lie sound noble. Apologize to your son without asking him to comfort you. Apologize to Daniel without demanding that he return. Remove the photographs and posts that portray us as people who abandon your family. Then accept that forgiveness, access, and reconciliation are 3 different things. Will you tell Daniel to come home if I do? No. Her face hardened again. Then what is the point? That question is your problem. You still believe honesty is only valuable if it gets you what you want. She looked toward Oliver. He was repairing the train wheel beside Helen. He did not ask her to stay. That hurt her more than anger would have. Brooke picked up her handbag. At the workshop door, she turned toward me. Do you hate me? No. How can you not? Hating you would require carrying you every day. I already carried your choices for 7 years. I am putting them down. She left without another word. The following morning, Brooke removed the Thanksgiving post. Then she posted a new statement. It was not perfect, but it was honest enough to be painful. She wrote that Daniel's parents had attempted contact for years, that she had withheld letters and gifts, and that the estrangement had not been their choice. She asked people not to attack anyone involved. The statement remained online for 6 hours before she deleted her entire account. Daniel did not return home. He and Brooke began counseling separately, then together. I stayed out of it. There were no dramatic court scenes, public confrontations, or satisfying speeches delivered to a judge. Real families usually fall apart in quieter rooms. Daniel rented a 2-bedroom apartment close to Oliver's school. He stopped drinking, something I had not realized had become a problem until he admitted it. Brooke moved temporarily into her parents' guest house. Oliver divided his time between them and spent 2 weekends each month with us. Whether Daniel and Brooke would remain married was their decision. I told him only one thing. Do not return because guilt is uncomfortable. Return only if the truth is welcome in the house. Months passed. Brooke apologized to Helen in our kitchen. She did not ask to be forgiven. Helen listened, cried, and said, I hope you become the mother Oliver needs. That is not the same as pretending you did not hurt us. Brooke nodded. It was the first adult conversation they had ever had. Our relationship with her remained limited. There were no family vacations, affectionate social media captions, or sudden claims that everything had healed. Trust returned in inches. Sometimes it did not move at all. Oliver, however, became part of our daily lives. He planted tomatoes with Helen and insisted on measuring each plant's growth. He joined me in the workshop every Saturday morning. We repaired the wooden train, finished the bookshelf, and eventually began building a desk for his bedroom. The first time he came inside with sawdust in his hair and a dark smudge across his cheek. Brooke saw him and froze. I waited for criticism. She handed him a towel and said, You look happy. I am, he replied. She looked at my hands, then at his. Wash before dinner. We always do, he said. That was all. The toy chest I built before Oliver was born now sits at the foot of his bed in Daniel's apartment. He stores books, tools, soccer medals, and every letter Helen wrote inside it. One afternoon, he asked why we had saved so many things for a person who might never meet us. Helen answered before I could. Love does not become foolish just because someone blocks the door. On Oliver's 9th birthday, we held a small dinner at our house. Daniel came. Brooke came separately. Martin and Cynthia did not attend. Helen made chocolate cake. Oliver opened a set of real woodworking tools, size for younger hands. Brooke looked nervous, but said nothing. After dinner, Oliver asked everyone to come into the workshop. Against the wall stood a bench he and I had built together from cherry wood left over from his toy chest. The seat was slightly uneven. One joint had required repair. A faint hammer mark remained on the side because Oliver refused to let me sand it away. That is where I missed, he explained. I want to remember I fixed it. He had burned 4 words into the front edge. Built by hand, kept by love, Helen cried. Daniel put his arm around me. Brooke stood near the doorway, looking at the bench and then at my scarred hands. It is beautiful, she said. Oliver smiled. Grandpa says beautiful does not mean perfect. Your grandpa is right. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Helen and I sat on the porch beneath the maple tree. The house was quiet again, but it was no longer empty in the same way. Oliver's cup sat near the porch steps. His jacket hung over the back of a chair. Sawdust followed him everywhere despite Brooke's former fears. Do you think we should have fought harder? Helen asked. Back then? For Daniel. For Oliver. I considered it. I think we confused dignity with silence for too long. She nodded. But chasing them might have let Brooke call us dangerous. Probably. So what should we have done? I do not know. That is the truth people rarely include in stories about family betrayal. There is not always a perfect response waiting for the injured person. Sometimes every available choice costs something. Speak up and you are called hostile. Stay quiet and the lie grows. Forgive quickly and the harm continues. Refuse forgiveness and people call you bitter. The best you can do is stop abandoning yourself while other people decide whether to value you. I spent 7 years believing I had to remain endlessly patient because I was the father. Helen believed she had to accept crumbs because she was the grandmother. Daniel believed silence was the price of keeping his marriage. Oliver believed the absence of cards meant the absence of love. Every one of us had accepted a lie because challenging it seemed more painful than living inside it. Brooke's lies did damage, but our fear gave them room. I no longer believe family titles are permanent permission slips. Being a son does not excuse cowardice. Being a wife does not excuse control. Being a mother does not make every decision protective. Being a grandparent does not require accepting humiliation for access to a child. Love can be unconditional while relationships remain conditional. That is not cruelty. That is self-respect. Brooke once looked at my hands and saw dirt. Oliver looked at the same hands and saw proof that I had spent my life building, repairing, teaching, and staying. Neither of them changed my hands. They only revealed the kind of eyes looking at them. These days, when Oliver enters the workshop, he puts on his safety glasses, rolls up his sleeves, and asks what we are building. Sometimes it is a shelf, Sometimes it is a box. Sometimes it is simply the trust that should have been built years earlier. I no longer waste time imagining the childhood moments we missed. Grief deserves to be felt, but it should not be allowed to steal the time that finally arrives. Last Saturday, Oliver placed his hand beside mine on the workbench. His fingers are longer now. A small callus has begun forming near his thumb. "Grandpa," he said, "do you think my hands will look like yours someday?" I looked at the boy I had waited 7 years to know. "Only if you use them for something worthwhile." He nodded seriously. "Good." Then he picked up the piece of cherry wood between us and began measuring. I watched him work beneath the warm workshop light while Helen stood in the doorway carrying 2 cups of cocoa. For the first time, I understood that we had not defeated Brooke. We had defeated the belief that her approval determined whether we belonged. The most satisfying ending was not watching her lose control. It was realizing she no longer controlled the value of our love. So tell me honestly, if someone hid your letters, erased you from family photographs, and kept you away from a child for 7 years, would you eventually allow them back into your life after a sincere apology? Or are some betrayals too deliberate to deserve another chance?